For almost half a century, if you wanted a hot hatch, you bought a Golf GTI. However, the previous few generations have lost some of that sparkle, and with rivals like the Focus ST and i30N hot on the heels, VW needed to inject some fun back into the model. Here we have the Mk8 GTI. VW claims to have injected more fun into it. Let's go and find out. If you sat there thinking that on paper the Mk8 and the Mk7 are basically the same car, you aren't really wrong. I mean, yeah, there are differences, but underneath we've still got that same EA888 engine, now in its 4th generation. We've still got a 7-speed DSG gearbox here. You can get a 6-speed manual. We've got a new fuel injection system which helps with responsiveness down low and the throttle. Around 1600 RPM, we get that full 273 pound-feet of torque all the way up. We've still got a front-wheel drive layout. We've got McPherson struts up front and a multi-link rear suspension. But crucially, VW has attempted to inject a bit more fun into this model by stiffening up the spring rates at the front, but particularly at the rear, to help with manoeuvrability at low speed in those tight corners, something that the i30N does very well. Now on the Mk8 Golf GTI, Volkswagen has done a lot of shouting about its new vehicle dynamics manager. Now this essentially stops individual components from reading and working out how best to apply the power onto the road and working out your steering angle and etc. for traction control. Instead, it has one module that reads every single component in order to make them work harmoniously together. So with all those changes, what does it actually translate to on the road? We've got a nice back road here, so we can have a little play. We're in 3rd gear. Okay, torque there in that mid-range. That's famous for the EA888. It just pulls all the way through. It dies off after about 5.5. It doesn't climb to the red line like the Civic does, but it does pull remarkably well, and I do question whether any more than 250 horsepower, say, is too much in a front-wheel drive hot hatch, because we are spinning the wheels slightly. We are in January, we have had horrendous conditions lately, and it's very wet today. So we have got Volkswagen's E-Diff. They've carried across from the Mk7. We've got a nice tight corner here. Yeah, the front end, you can feel straight away, it wants to dive in much more eagerly than the previous generation. It doesn't dart across like the Civic, but it rides the bumps so much better than the Civic, so you can extract a similar level of performance. I don't know if you'll be going faster on this particular road in the Civic because of how stiff that car is, whereas the Golf tends to ride the bumps a little bit more. You can feel it stiffer over the previous generation for sure, but it's certainly one of the comfier hot hatches still. Downshifts are lightning fast. Volkswagen has carried over the DSG gearbox, but they have implemented a shift-by-wire system to help with the times a little bit. They were quick then, they're still quick now, very responsive. The one thing I don't like, I've mentioned before, are these little baby plastic paddles on the back. Do you see what happened then? The lane of keep assist just tried to drive me into the barrier because I went over the thing. It dragged me in. Now this is where the Golf GTI excels, because we're in a little 30-mile-an-hour zone, or sorry, going into a 20-mile-an-hour zone in a little village, and we're just going to knock it down into comfort mode. We're going to soften off those dampers. We're going to get the gearbox in its softest, laziest setting, so we're getting higher up the gears and better economy. Now on the topic of economy, on the way here, cruise control the whole way, I was doing about 70 miles an hour and I was doing 40 mpg the whole way. It becomes the car that you can use every day, and that's what the Golf GTI is all about. And this is where the Golf GTI starts to excel, because unlike its rivals that never really settle down, still a bit fidgety over the bumps, this one does a really good job of just softening off those dampers, riding over the bumps nicely. Engine noise not noisy, road noise is quiet. Now on the drive modes, we've got Eco, Comfort, Sport and Individual. Individual allows you to tailor the settings to you, and there are about 1 million settings on here as well. We've got steering, engine, drive sound, damper settings, light assistance, air conditioning. I'm not sure what that has to do with driving, but the practical stuff, it gets a bit boring, doesn't it? There we go. Handles remarkably well. You can really carry the speed through the corners, and when you come to a tight corner, you can stamp on the brakes with confidence. There is quite a lot of movement actually under heavy braking. The rear goes quite light, and I'm assuming that is aided because of the stiffer springs as well. It can be unnerving to begin with in these conditions, but you do learn to get used to it, and you can actually use it to help angle yourself on corners. And we're back down to a 30 zone. Right, let's talk about this interior. It looks the part. You have a screen over here, you have a digital screen as your cluster in front of you. On there you can tailor how you want things. You can have your speed in the center, you can have a rev counter, you can have average consumption, you can have just about everything you could possibly wish. In the center we have a touchscreen system, which everyone seems to be moving to. Now this is where things get frustrating for me, because the climate control system is now integrated into the infotainment system, but you do have what appear to be some buttons in front of it. Now they aren't buttons like everything else in this car. It seems to be a touchscreen, a shiny gloss, black gloss touchscreen that has haptic feedback, and I just hate it, because flicking through the screens, I don't know whether I've actually pressed a button. If you flick through too quickly on the dash when you're wanting to get to a particular setting, it doesn't read it and only reads it as one. It doesn't read it as separate inputs, so you have to keep pressing it over and over again. And I found I seem to be spending more time looking for where the button is on the screen, or where the button is on the wheel, or I say button, they're not actually buttons. It looks smart, it looks futuristic, but I don't think it delivers as well as a regular wheel with regular buttons. Now comes the big question. How much is the Mk8 Golf GTI? Well, it starts at about £35,000. This one is £38,000. Now for a Golf GTI, you might be thinking that is a lot of money, and it is. It's a few £1,000s more than the Civic Type R. Something like a PCP deal, you'll be looking at around £500 a month realistically, maybe more depending on what sort of deposit you put down, but it's not a cheap car by any means. Is it actually worth £38,000? I have to be honest, and as much as I do like this car, and I really do like this car more than I thought I would do, I don't think it is. No, I think it's a touch too expensive, especially when you consider that it's knocking on the same money as the Mercedes, which has always been that touch above in terms of premium quality and what you get, particularly with the interiors. The main question we wanted to answer though today was, has the GTI got its groove back? Yes, simple as that. I think it does. I think it's sharper than it has been before in the past. It has a little bit of fun side on the edge if you want to play about with the rear, and it is still bloody quick. I know it says 240 horsepower, but in a front-wheel drive with this much grip, it's plenty quick enough. And if you want more power, well, we already know the AAA engine can do over 400 horsepower. So go and get yourself a little map. Yeah, I like this Mk8 Golf GTI.